Boys and girls, children of all ages, welcome to Robert Sports Show. I'm your host, Robert. Alright, NCAA week 3, 55 games for you this week. One of these weeks, I'm going to do every game. Don't know when, but I'm going to definitely try. 55 this week. Last week we did 35. I ended up 30-5 on the wins. 30 wins out of 35, which was great. Against the spread, 20-15. Over/under, 16-19. Season totals. Win-loss 77-12. Against the spread and over/under are both 40-39. You add all that up, do a little math, comes out to be 63.5% on picks. The goal is 65-70. You know what? I'll take it. I'm happy with it. So we got 55 huge games this week. Let's get started. We have the 2-0 North Carolina Tar Heels taking on the 2-0 Wake Forest Deacons. Wake Forest is favored by 3.5. I hate when they do 3.5. I hate when they do 7.5. Is it going to be a field goal or is it going to be a touchdown? 3.5? I got to decide. I like the 4 and the 5 because then you get a little leeway. 3.5. Do I pick the over or do I pick the under? I am taking the Wake Forest to win. I'm taking North Carolina to cover the 3.5. I think it's going to be a 3-point game. Taking under on the 66.5. Next up, we have the 1-1 Kansas Jayhawks versus the 2-0 Boston College Eagles. Boston College is favored by 21.5. I have the Eagles winning, Jayhawks covering that 21.5 and under on the 53. Next up, we have a pair of 1-1 teams. We have the 20th ranked Washington Huskies versus the Houston Cougars. Washington favored by 9 on the road, winning, covering. I am taking under on the 75. I may regret that, but I am doing it. Taking under. Next up, we have Miami of Ohio Redhawks 1-1 versus the Cincinnati Bearcats, also 1-1. Cincinnati favored by 16.5. I got them winning, covering. I got the Bearcats winning, the Redhawks covering, over on the 48.5. Next up, we have a pair of 2-0 teams. Big 12 versus SEC, we have the Kansas State Jayhawks at 2-0 versus the Mississippi State Bulldogs, also 2-0. Bulldogs favored by 8. I think a Bulldog can be a Wildcat, so I got them winning, covering the 8, and over on the 48.5. Next up, we have the Chattanooga Moccasins 1-1 versus the 0-2 Tennessee Volunteers. Tennessee is favored by 28. They haven't been playing all that well. Can they beat a FCS team by 28? I hope so. Picking the Volunteers to win and cover on the 51.5. Next up, we have the Arkansas State Red Wolves at 1-1 versus the third-ranked Georgia Bulldogs 3-0. Bulldogs favored by 33.5. I had them winning, covering. Sorry, I had the Bulldogs winning. I had the Red Wolves covering at 33.5. Then I'm taking over on the 57. Next up, we have the Pittsburgh Panthers 1-1 versus the 13th ranked Penn State Nittany Lions, who are 2-0. Penn State favored by 17. I got them winning, covering, over on the 54. Next up, we have 21 ranked Maryland Terrapins at 2-0 versus the 1-0 Temple Owls. Maryland's favored by 7.5. I got them winning, covering, and over on the 64. Eastern Michigan Eagles 1-1 versus the 2-0 Illinois Fighting Illini. Illini favored by 8, winning, covering, taking over on the 55. Next up, we have the NC State Wolfpack, who are 2-0 versus the West Virginia Mountaineers, who are 1-1. Let's see. NC State is favored by 7. I'm giving the 7 to West Virginia. I got them winning, covering, and over on the 48. Next up, we have the Paladines at 1-1 versus Virginia Tech Hokies, also 1-1. Virginia Tech is favored by 21.5. I got them winning, covering, and under on the 64.5. Next up, we have the 6th-ranked Ohio State Buckeyes, 2-0 versus the Indiana Hoosiers, also 2-0. Buckeyes favored by 15.5. I have the Hoosiers covering the 15.5 and under on the 61. Next, we have the Sentinel Bulldogs 0-2 versus Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets 1-1. Georgia Tech favored by 26. I got them winning, covering, and under on the 57.5. Next up, we have one of the military branches with the Air Force Falcons, who are 1-0 versus Colorado Buffaloes, who are 2-0. Can't really do a video today without mentioning 9/11. Where were you when the world stopped turning? It's the biggest thing I've seen. One of the key moments that I've seen on Facebook when this all happened. Remember where I was at. I was mowing yards with the lawn company in the morning, working at the gas station in the afternoon. We pulled into a neighborhood. We had like 5 yards we mowed there. Me and Mike were pulling the equipment off the trailer. Mike and Pete were still in the truck. Come on, guys, we got work to do. Come on, get out of the truck. Pete gets out of the truck. Both kind of shocked look on her face. We're like, "What's up, guys?" And like, a plane flew into the towers, the Twin Towers, New York. What? What are you talking about? And then they said the Pentagon. I'm like, what the hell is going on? It didn't kind of sink in until probably 15, 20 minutes later. I went over to my truck and got a drink and turned the radio on for a minute and started listening to it. Got home, watched some of the news, took a shower, went to work at the gas station. Sitting there, and just the chaoticness of the gas station. You know, there was people that were price gouging all over the country. Gas prices were double, triple, and quadruple in just a matter of minutes. And I asked my boss, I'm like, why is gas prices going up everywhere? He is, well, in the towers in New York, a lot of the major oil companies had offices there. I'm like, oh. And I was young, naive. I was what? What was I in 01? 24? And I was still young. I mean, just kind of taking this all in. And I remember at the gas station, just chaoticness. I mean, just stupid chaotic. People almost getting in fights in the parking lot, the lines, people being ignorant and rude, the whole nine. We closed at 8 o'clock at night. We got all done. I was supposed to be off the next day. Where I worked at is an older gas station, built like in the 20s. And there's a little brick wall right there in front. One of the owners was sitting on that wall. I sit down next to him and I go, "Do you want me to work tomorrow?" He said, "I don't know." He said, "I don't know what tomorrow's going to bring. Go ahead and come in." 2 weeks later, I moved 4 hours away to get married. And I remember that night talking to my fiance, and we were like, does this change anything? Does this change our wedding? Does this change you moving here? Shouldn't. It didn't. But you just didn't know what the next day was going to be. Here we are now, 18 years later. We know the world we live in now. We know how the world has changed in the 18 years. Best thing we can do is, I'm saying this to everyone, is we just need to come together as people. Nobody cares about other things. Color, race, any of that. It doesn't matter. Each person matters. You know, I mean, you gotta look at people, as human beings. But anyway, I don't really get too much of that kind of stuff on the show here, but I wanted to kind of throw that out there and just, you know, my heart goes out to everyone who lost someone 18 years ago today. I can imagine what they're going through. I can imagine what the first responders went through that day. Every time I speak to someone in the military, every time I speak to someone who serves us, police officer, fire, ambulance, thank them. I do. Because they're doing a job they don't know they're going to go home that night. Obviously, we had what we had here. They didn't go home that night. But anyway, back to the games. That said, it's everything we do is in a memory of anyone that was lost during that. And you got to figure with the fallout from that, how many people that were involved in that got out because of the collapses and the building materials and all that have developed cancers from it. We all know that's the thing. So it's like it's still going to, as we go on in life, that moment changed the world's outlook. That moment changed millions of lives. Forever. Alright, so back to the games. Air Force Falcons 1-0 versus Colorado Buffaloes 2-0. Colorado is favored by 3.5. You know what? I'm giving that 3.5 to Air Force. I've got Air Force winning, covering under on the 58.5. Next up, we have the Norfolk State Spartans 1-1 versus the Coastal Carolina Chickasaws. I don't know how to pronounce their name. Whatever. Coastal Carolina, who are 1-1. Coastal Carolina is favored by 27. Sure, why not? I got them winning, covering, and under on the 48.5. Next up, we have the Florida Atlantic Owls 0-2 versus the Ball State Cardinals 1-1. Florida Atlantic is favored by 2.5. I'm giving the 2.5 to Ball State. I got Ball State winning, covering at 2.5, and under on the 67.5. Next up, we have the New Mexico Lobos 1-0 versus the 7th ranked Notre Dame Fighting Irish 1-0. Notre Dame favored by 34.5. New Mexico covers the 34.5. The Fighting Irish win, under on the 61.5. Next up, we have the Akron Zips 0-2 versus the Central Michigan Chippewas, who are 1-1. Central Michigan's favored by 3.5. Got them winning, covering, and under on 46.5. Next up, I have the Stanford Cardinal 1-1 versus the 17th ranked UCF Knights 2-0. UCF favored by 7.5. I got them winning, covering, and over on the 59. Memphis Tigers 2-0 versus the South Alabama Jaguars 1-1. Memphis favored by 19. Got them winning, covering, over on the 57.5. Next up, we have the UNLV Running Rebels, or just Rebels now, 1-1 versus Northwestern Wildcats 0-1. Wildcats favored by 20. I got them winning, UNLV covering, and under on the 57. The Army West Point Knights 1-1 versus the University of Texas San Antonio Roadrunners 1-1. The West Point Knights are favored by 17. I got them winning. I got the Roadrunners covering the 17, under on the 45. Next up, we have the 2-0 Oklahoma State Cowboys versus the 1-1 Tulsa Golden Hurricanes. Cowboys favored by 14. I got them winning, covering, and over on the 65. Next up, 24th ranked USC Trojans 2-0 versus the BYU Cougars 1-1. Trojans favored by 4. I got them winning, covering, and under on the 55.5. Next up, East Carolina Pirates 1-1. The Navy Midshipmen 1-0. Navy's favored by 7. Got them winning, covering, and under on the 54. It is a coincidence. Just a coincidence. I'm filming this video on 9/11. I picked Navy, Army, and Air Force to win. That was not planned. That was nothing that most of this was wrote out on Monday. Didn't even realize they'd done that till now. That is pretty cool. Georgia Southern Eagles 1-1 versus the Minnesota Golden Gophers 2-0. Minnesota favored by 15.5. I got them winning, covering, and over on the 46. Next up, the Southeast Louisiana Lions 1-0 versus Ole Miss. The Ole Miss Rebels 1-1. Ole Miss is favored by 31. I got them winning, covering, and over on the 53. Next up, we have the Louisville Cardinal 1-1 versus the Western Kentucky Hilltoppers 1-1. Louisville favored by 9.5. I got them winning, covering, and over on the 54. The 19th ranked Iowa Hawkeyes 2-0 versus the Iowa State Cyclones 1-1. This could be one of those games that Iowa State can step up and beat the Hawkeyes. We got Big 10 versus Big 12. Both teams have the ability to win this game. I am taking the Hawkeyes. I got them winning, covering the 2.5 and over on the 44.5. But don't be surprised if Iowa State wins that. Next up, Arizona State Sun Devils 2-0 versus the 18th ranked Michigan State Spartans, also 2-0. Spartans are favored by 14. I got the Spartans winning, the Sun Devils covering the 14, and then over on the 42.5. Next up, we have the Colorado State Rams 1-1 versus the Arkansas Razorbacks 1-1. Razorbacks favored by 9.5. I got them winning, covering, and under on the 61. Next up, we have the Bethlehem Cook Wildcats at 1-0 versus the Miami Hurricanes at 0-2. Who thought Miami would be 0-2 after 2 weeks? They lose this game, they might as well just quit for the year. But the Hurricanes favored by 40. I got them winning. I got the Wildcats covering the 40. And then I got under on the 56. I think it's going to be like a 36-0 type of game or something. But what should be like 80-0 now that I say that. Cal Poly Mustangs 1-1 versus the Oregon State Beavers 0-2. Beavers favored by 16.5, winning, covering, under on the 76. North Texas Mean Green 1-1 versus the California Golden Bears 2-0. Golden Bears favored by 2 touchdowns. I think Mean Green will cover that and be over on the 50.5. Idaho State Bengals 1-0 versus the 11th ranked Utah Utes 2-0. Utah favored by 36.5. I got them winning, covering, and under on the 64. Next up, the Idaho Vandals 1-1 versus the Wyoming Cowboys 2-0. Cowboys are favored by 25. I got Idaho covering the 25 and over on the 55. And next up, we have the Buffalo Bulls 1-1 versus the Liberty Flames, who are 0-2. Buffalo favored by 5.5, winning, covering, and under on the 58. Next up, the Ohio Bobcats 1-1 versus the Marshall Thundering Herd 1-1. Marshall favored by 5.5. I'm actually taking Ohio to win this. I'm giving Ohio the 5.5, covering it over on the 49. Next up, Kent State Golden Flashes 1-1 versus the 8th ranked Auburn Tigers 2-0. Auburn is favored by 35.5. I got them winning. I got Kent State covering that 35.5, and I'm taking over on the 52.5. Here's the problem with Georgia, Alabama, LSU, Auburn. They all play in the SEC. So they're going to beat up each other. Only 2 teams can come out of the SEC in the SEC title game. And you both have to be undefeated at the title game in order to have anyone have a shot at losing a game and being in the playoffs. So I would love to see it somehow come down to... I hate seeing 2 teams out of the SEC, but I love seeing 2 teams out of the SEC. It just shows you how much dominant that conference is. If you go on Robert Sports Show on YouTube, go to the channel, the main video on the channel, which is a realignment that I came up with last year for the NCAA. Take a look at that. I have a couple other ideas. I may redo it end of the year, next year, maybe beginning of next year, I may redo it. Is you don't have any preseason games. You need to redo the conferences. You need to have, let's say, 10 conference games a year, 5 home, 5 away. Have 2 non-conference games. One of the non-conference games has to be against. So week 1, every FBS team plays an FCS team. So week 1, every FBS team plays an FCS team. That way everybody has one powder puff game. Obviously we've seen what some of the schools have done with that, but that way it kind of builds up the FCS because they all play a major college. And so you do your preseason rankings 1 through 30 on the FBS. You do your preseason rankings of the FCS. I'm not sure how many teams there are on the FCS. And you do, the worst FBS teams of 130 versus number 1 on the FCS. Just do it the opposite. If you run into a situation where there's not enough teams, and then maybe you can kind of fill in with other colleges, or maybe you can do something a little different, but everybody plays kind of a powder puff game on week 1. Your, say, week 2 or whatever you do, your one non-conference game you play, has to be against a equal conference, I guess. If you're part of the Power 5, it has to be versus the Power 5. If you're not part of the Power 5, it doesn't have to be against the Power 5. And then have your 10 conference games. I'll work that out and get a video about it here, but just when you see games like some of these here, it's like Alabama, Auburn favored by 35.5. The next game, Lamar Cardinals 2-0 versus the 16th ranked Texas A&M Aggies. The Aggies are favored by 43.5. Really? Aggies win, cover the 43.5 and over on the 63. Another one of those games that I could see as kind of a possibility of an upset is, and this affects the SEC as well. We have the 9th ranked Florida Gators 2-0 versus the 2-0 Kentucky Wildcats. Florida is favored by 8 on the road. I have them winning, covering, and over on the 50.5. But don't be surprised if a Kentucky team comes in there and beats Florida. And they did it last year. They went on a run. So who says they can't do it again? What do you do if you have a Kentucky team that knocks off LSU or Georgia or an Alabama? Would they mess silly? Say Kentucky goes on. Believe Kentucky's in the same division as Alabama. Say they go on to beat Alabama. And it is Kentucky versus Georgia AFC Championship or SEC Championship game. Georgia wins. Would a one-loss Kentucky make the championship, the playoffs? In that scenario, would a one-loss Alabama make the playoffs? That's the problem we have with the way the playoffs are. There's no clear cut. This is it no matter what. Unfortunately, who you are matters more than what you do. Just saying. Just like I don't think Tui's going to win the Heisman. Because he is that good. Because the team is that good. He doesn't go above and beyond. He doesn't have to go above and beyond. It's like Tom Brady. When you're an Alabama player, you're like a Tom Brady. You're like Brady with the Patriots. Pull out player A, put in player B. Pretty close to the same. But I have Florida winning. Just what if Kentucky wins? Next up, we have the Hawaiian Rainbow Warriors 2-0 versus 23rd ranked Washington Huskies 1-1. Huskies favored by 21. I got them winning. I have Hawaii covering the 21. I'm taking over on the 59. Northwestern State Demons 0-2 versus the 4th ranked LSU Tigers. Again, LSU is favored by 51.5 with an over/under of 68. So when they went 60-0, I'm taking the over. I'm covering the 51.5 and under on the 68. Next up, we have the Southeastern Missouri State Indians 1-1 versus the Missouri Tigers 1-1. Missouri's favored by 34.5. Over under is 67. I think SEMO, which is Southeast Missouri State is what they're called, SEMO. SEMO covers the 34. I'm taking under on the 67. Next up, Florida State Seminoles 1-1 versus the 25th ranked Virginia Cavaliers. Did not write their record down, but I believe they are 1-1. Virginia favored by 7.5. I got them winning, covering, and under on the 57. Next up, the TCU Horned Frogs 1-0 versus the Purdue Boilermakers 1-1. TCU favored by 2 on the road. I got them winning, covering, and over on the 51.5. The number 1 ranked Clemson Tigers 2-0 versus the Syracuse Orange. Clemson favored by 28. Could you imagine what would happen in Syracuse if the Orange knocked off the Tigers here? Whoa! There would be one hell of a party. We all know it ain't going to happen. Clemson covers 28 over on the 62.5. Just what if, San Diego State Aztecs 2-0 versus the New Mexico State Aggies 0-2. Aztecs favored by 15.5. I got them winning, covering, and under on the 50. Next up, with the 5th ranked Oklahoma Sooners 2-0 versus the 0-2 UC Bruins. Oklahoma favored by 23. I got them winning, covering, and over on the 73.5. It is a Big 12 school. They're going over. Next up, the Northern Illinois Huskies 1-1 versus the Nebraska Cornhuskers 1-1. Cornhuskers favored by 2 touchdowns to 14. I got them winning, covering the 14 and under on the 54.5. Next up, we have the 12th ranked Texas Longhorns 1-1 versus the Rice Owls 0-2. Longhorns are favored by 32. 32! Have been winning, covering, and over on the 56.5. Next up, the Portland State Vikings 1-1. 22nd ranked Boise State Broncos 2-0. Boise State is favored by 31.5. Probably going to regret this move. I have Portland covering the 31.5. I'm taking over on the 54. Next up, we got the Texas Tech Red Raiders 2-0 versus the Arizona Wildcats 1-1. Texas Tech favored by 2 with an over-under of 77. I got Texas Tech covering the 2 and under on the 77. And last but not least, we have the Montana Grizzlies 2-0 versus the 15th ranked Oregon Ducks 1-1. Ducks favored by 37 with an over-under of 66. Ducks win, cover the 37 and under on the 66. That is going to wrap up week number 3 for the NCAA college football season. Make sure you check out Rubber Sports Show for CFL Week 14, NFL Week 2, all right here on Rubber Sports Show. Maybe some NASCAR stuff before the weekend. We do have some big stuff going on in NASCAR this weekend. We have the Monster Energy NASCAR Cup Series race 1 of the playoffs. We have the NASCAR Xfinity Series, the last race of the regular season. We have the Gander Outdoor Truck Series, final race of the first round of the playoffs. Eliminations happen after the race. So all that going down in Vegas this weekend. Make sure you check that out if you're a NASCAR fan. WWE Clash of Champions is this weekend. We have AAA, Lucha Libre AAA Wrestling invading New York with Impact Wrestling. That's a thing this weekend. We have Josh Barnett's Bloodsport 2. That's also a thing this weekend. So there is a lot going on. Pro wrestling, NASCAR, football, all going on this weekend. Make sure you check it all out. As always, thanks for watching Robert Sports Show. Don't just have a great day. Have a spiffy day. Robert Sports Show, your YouTube leader, sports channel.